Ready? Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Welcome to NYU Bookstore. I'm Sue Shapiro, NYU graduate, and thrilled to invite you to this panel tonight. And I want to thank Francisco Serrano from NYU for letting us take over the store again, and videographer DeMarcus Medusa is in the back, thank you. And I'm going to introduce the panelists here, and I'm going to ask some questions, and then we'll open it up for you guys to answer questions. And a lot of you know I taught at NYU for years, and one of my favorite things to do is to, first of all, focus on publishing, because nobody does. So I love to, I studied at University of Michigan and a graduate degree at NYU, and after thousands of dollars and 2 degrees, I didn't even know how to write a cover letter to send out any of my work, and so I love to teach the classes that I wish I could take and to talk about the stuff that took me years and years to figure out. And I like to get together the most brilliant editors, agents, and authors to spill all the secrets of publishing. So that's what we're doing here today. Okay, so I'll start at the left and I'll introduce you to everybody here. So Jesse David Fox is a senior writer at New York Magazine and host of the Good One podcast. In 2023, he published Comedy Book, How Comedy Conquered Culture and the Magic That Makes It Work for FSG. And thanks, and he actually, we met a long time ago when he spoke to my new school writing class about how to break into New York Magazine. And a lot of people get in there. So I hope all his great karma comes back to him. And next to him is Kate McKean, who's a literary agent at Howard Moorheim Literary Agency in Brooklyn. She was an NYU adjunct professor and earned her MA in fiction at the University of Southern Mississippi. She's written for Poets and Writers, Electric Lit, and Catapult, and she's the author of the debut book, Right Through It, which we have copies of here, that just came out over the summer. And also, Source Books will publish her debut picture book, Pay Attention to Me, in 2026. And next to her is Prannoy Sarkar, who's a nonfiction literary agent at Borchardt, where he represents experts and journalists across many subject areas. He was previously a book editor at Little Brown, Macmillan, and S&S, where he published a range of best-selling and award-winning books. And I used to make him speak to my classes when he was a book editor, and now he has to come speak as a literary agent. And next to him is Matthew Carnicelli, who's also one of my favorite speakers, and he's been an agent for over 2 decades. After having held senior editorial positions at Dutton and McGraw-Hill, he mostly handles serious nonfiction, including history, current affairs, memoir, and business, but he also does some fiction, though he has no idea what romanticy is. And next to him is Lee Oglesby, who's a freelance editor focusing on narrative nonfiction. She was previously an in-house editor at Flatiron Books, Milkweed Editions, and Oxford University Press. Lee began her career in medical and academic publishing and is interested in books that bring together research with personal narratives. A Brooklynite, she's a graduate of Amherst College. And next to me, Sarah Robbins is an editor at Abrams, acquiring narrative nonfiction and memoir for Abrams Press, who published the bestsellers Paper Doll by Dylan Mulroney, Reese Book Club pick We Will Be Jaguars and Wars of the State by Claudia Rowe. Originally from Rhode Island, they graduated from Hofstra in 2019. Interned at Melville House Publishing, The Experiment, and Grove Atlantic. And to my right here is New York Times bestselling author Matteo Esperanza, and his first novel, Black Buck, about racism in corporate America, was a Read with Jenna Book Club pick, and he was named a recipient of the National Book Foundation's 535 prize. His second novel, This Great Hemisphere, was recently published by Dutton. NPR called it one of the best books of the year, a futuristic dystopian speculative fiction with an inventive, thoughtful allegory of race at the center. So thank you so much for the panelists. And I thought I would start with Jesse, because as I said, Jesse spoke to my classes a long time ago when he was an editor at New York Magazine. And Jesse, I always think a great way to start writing, even if you have a book idea, is to start with short pieces. And a lot of my students have had luck with New York Magazine in Vulture, The Cut, and Curved. And so I tell my students that 3 pages can change your life when we're talking about like a modern love essay or an op-ed, but actually most people that are selling pieces to New York Magazine seem to be doing it from pitches. So could you talk about that a little bit? I know when you were an editor, you were probably getting pitches from freelancers, right? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I primarily work at Vulture, so like we are getting pitches of all different sorts, and from in different levels of writers. I think what I tell people, especially most of the interview now, is freelancing budgets being what they are, we're looking for pieces really that if you're pitching it, you're the only person that can do it, and you have a certain sort of expertise that you'd be bringing to it. That either it's because no one on staff would have that expertise because they are having more of a generalist, or it doesn't even have to be a niche interest. You just have a sort of niche expertise in a thing that has large interest. I mean, if you look at art forms that have not been covered as much as, say, TV or movies, there are large opportunities because people have not written about it, and you can maybe develop expertise there. But the thing that I tell people probably to pitch least is straight up Q&As, because they don't, people don't read them that much, and also there's not really much you can do in that form that would separate you. It really is how can you convey something others don't have, either be it research, expertise, or some sort of reporting.
And did you start freelancing with short pieces?
Yeah, not for Vulture. Essentially, this was a time of the internet that does not exist. This was, let's say, 15 or so years ago. There are a lot of websites you can rank at for free that had some amount of readership, which is not a thing really exists now. Now you do Twitter or Substack and hopefully it reach people. But I would pitch those places and I wrote for free for a couple of years. Now I got discovered because I would make funny graphs about things in pop culture. I did funny graphs for one website, and another website called Splitsider asked me to recap a television show using those funny graphs. Vulture saw those and asked me if I ever do something like that for Vulture. I did funny graphs versions of the Oscars, and that just got me in. I think for the most part, I was just trying to be a blogger. I didn't know enough about journalism to be like, oh, one day I'm going to pitch long form articles to whoever. I was just trying to prove that I can do the day-to-day job, and that is what I was able to get in the door doing. And in many ways, I learned journalism and pitching while already being at Vulture. But again, this was a very different version of the internet. Vulture was 15 times smaller than it is in terms of readership. So now it's you'd be trying to figure out ways of getting noticed. In many ways, the things you'd write for free previously for other websites, you probably have to write for free for yourself. Honestly, it's for something like that.
Cool, and I know Christopher Bananas, when he zooms into my class, will always say to my students, tell me something I don't already know. That's how you should start with the pitch. And then what else do we say? We say, why you, why me, why now? Cool. Okay, Kate. Now, if you go to Manuscript Wishlist, if you're looking for a literary agent, which I know a lot of people in the audience are, Manuscript Wishlist will list all of the genres that the agent is interested in. And I know, Kate, you're very broad, and her new book will tell you all kinds of information. I'm especially interested, since you're the only one that has sold a kids book and you represent kids book, if you could tell us a little bit about kids books, because a lot of my students are having luck. And I actually had luck with a co-authored middle grade. So if you don't mind, could you break it down a little bit? So I've had a few students who've had luck with picture books, which are 700 words, some of them.
Yeah, some of them. The word count of a picture book doesn't quite matter. It's the page count, honestly. It's the only type of publishing that matters, the page count. And they want a finished book of 32 pages, or around about. And so you have to think about what is on what page. And when I wrote my picture book, I didn't start that way. And I would say, my book is about a cat who wants to be famous, and his name is Edgar. And I was like, Edgar had a very bad day. He lost his lunch, and his umbrella broke, and all this stuff. But you don't say that part in a picture book, because the image, the illustration, whether you do them or not, has a soaking wet cat with a paper bag that's torn and a broken umbrella. So you just say, Edgar had a very bad day. And you have to marry those two things and think about what story the illustrations are telling and what story the text is telling. And you don't have to draw your own picture book. I did not.
And then middle grade, I know there's all kinds of middle grade, but middle grade is, the one that I did was I think it was age 8 to 12.
8 to 12 is generally middle grade, and you want to think that the reader is actually a little bit younger, because everybody read up. We all read adult books when we were teenagers and we all read, middle grade books when we were a little bit younger. And so the idea of what you think a 10-year-old knows or thinks or does, it might be a little different. And it is not what you did when you were 10.
And then YA is 13 to 18?
Yeah, 13 and up. A lot of adults read YA, which is really spurred the boom of YA about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer ago. And that's kind of dropping off, unfortunately. YA is taken over basically by fantasy now and romantasy, which is fine. I think that will probably turn in the next couple years because how many of these and all the kids read, but there's a refresh of the market every couple of years because the kids who are reading middle grade will age out and read YA, and then those people will age up and read adult almost exclusively. So you can
Now,
kind
is
of
it correct? I've been telling my students that if it's fiction, which most picture books, YA and MG is fiction, that they really have to write the entire book before they would go to a literary agent, right? So you're not looking for proposal for a kid's fiction.
no, all fiction, the whole book. And I think if you were writing a nonfiction picture book, which is also a very big market, you write the whole thing. You don't write a book proposal for a nonfiction picture book. You could write a book proposal for a nonfiction middle grade, but that's a pretty small thing. You're probably not doing that.
Cool. Okay, and next to you, Pranoy. So Pranoy, you do mostly nonfiction, and I'm under the impression that with most nonfiction books, you just have to write a book proposal, right? Like people aren't writing the whole book, right?
Yeah, for nonfiction, it's predominantly a proposal. I mean, the general idea is that whether you're a journalist or a scholar or whatever it may be, you usually have a day job. I think all writers have a day job, James Patterson. And the advance that you would get from the book would help you take time off, generally to then finish the book. But yes, most nonfiction projects are based on a proposal.
And what, like 50, 70 pages is average, would we say?
It depends on the project. It depends on the nature of the kind of book you're pitching. I mean, I don't know if a length matters so much as the corresponding parts sort of add up to a whole. I mean, you're essentially presenting an idea. I mean, kind of the same questions that come down to a pitch, but then the proposal also shows execution. If writerly quality, or if it's a narrative, then the proposal needs to show evidence that the writer has narrative abilities. So there needs to be some kind of narrative, a sample chapter. If the author has an extensive network, that should be evident. What is the idea? Can they do it in concision? Are they the right person to write it? So the proposal sort of presents all of this as a sort of
Yeah, and I think Kate and I have both written there's really about 8 elements to proposals, and if anybody wants to email me, I have a couple successful proposals on my computer, so you can take a look at what is successful, like books that did really well, that got 6-figure advances, if you want to take a look at what the elements that you need.
And I included the book proposal for this book in the back of my book, minus the sample chapter, so you could see all the silly things I did that didn't end up on there.
Yeah, and then when you guys ask questions later, we can talk about if anybody wants more specific about what elements do you need for a book proposal. Great. Now, Matthew, for novels, and I know that you have done some fiction, do you agree that Kate was saying for kids' books, for a debut fiction, does somebody just have to write the whole book?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's no way I wouldn't consider a sample.
Okay, now here's the question, what about memoirs? Because I heard some editors and agents say that if it's a debut memoir, 20 or 30 sample pages that would be okay for a nonfiction book, might not be enough to show, since some people think that memoirs are closer to novels.
Yeah, I used to, I've been asked this a lot, and I used to say, the length of the sample doesn't necessarily matter because the whole thing about a memoir is it has kind of a moment of revelation, a cathartic moment. So that's really important. So I used to think, okay, maybe, I would submit a memoir, maybe 75 to 100 pages. But I think I've changed. I think now, because I've worked with some clients and they just haven't made it to the end. So I'm just reading memoirs like novels. You gotta finish it. It's too competitive.
Yeah, by the way, I had
It's just too
a
competitive.
couple agents, a couple editors from Counterpoint, and they said that they've actually signed up memoirs and then the person choked and they couldn't finish it,
Yeah,
so
that's the
debut
thing,
book.
that type of
And
stuff
so
is
they,
happening.
so now they're treating it more like a novel, so
Yeah.
they really want a first draft.
So that's really what I'm doing.
Okay, interesting. Now Lee, you're an expert at memoirs, and we did a panel at AWP that I thought was so interesting, where Lee talked about, well, we were all talking about how memoirs are a hard sell lately. Just your average memoir. I've analyzed it to death about why, because I love memoirs and I published a whole bunch of them early on. But one of the things that you were talking about, which was so smart, is that there's a way to add research so that a memoir becomes more of a nonfiction book, and there's more points of entry for audiences. So could you talk a little bit about that? Because I know we did that at, I know Marian's book, A Little Less Broken, about finding out that she's neurodivergent in her 30s. There were some great Flatiron books that did just that.
Yeah, so it's a category that we call Memoir Plus, or research memoir, where it can be, part memoir, traditional, telling the story of an extraordinary moment in somebody's life, and then the author does research to expand the story beyond themselves. So in the case of Marian's book, it was her discovery of having autism, but then also research into why it is difficult for women and girls to be diagnosed with autism. So that, from the editorial perspective as a publisher, makes it a lot easier to pitch and to promote and to have material for our marketing and publicity team to work with if there's a reason why this particular story is important right now. The research helps to ground the memoir so that it's not just a beautifully written story, but a story that is particularly relevant to cultural conversations that other people are engaged in a particular moment, and it expands beyond one particular author's story. And I found that I really enjoyed working on those kinds of books as an editor, having more layers to delve into beyond the literary aspect of the memoir part of the writing. But it's just a good challenge of figuring out the balance of, okay, when do you go into research in a particular chapter? When do you take a question and expand? And I think it was fun for my authors to write those books too. I think they really found it rewarding. But yeah, I'm really seeing those books do well in the marketplace right now. So that is
Cool. I co-authored a book with a Bosnian war survivor, and I remember we did the first 200 pages, which was just his story. And the editor of Penguin said, "This is great. Now just go away and give me 100 pages of Yugoslavian history so Americans know what the hell you're talking about." And by the way, it wound up being like if you go to a bookstore, it was under history, it was Eastern European War. So just what you said, it wound up being, it wasn't on the memoir shelf, it was on other shelves because people would go in and look for books on that topic. So it's smart.
Just an added point to that, I was having lunch with an editor and she told me that those types of books are much likelier to be adopted. And that's a big component to the success of those types of books. Adopted for courses.
Oh,
Classes.
yes, by the way,
Yeah.
it's on the curriculum, it
Totally.
is on the curriculum at several colleges, that's exactly true, really interesting. Okay, Sarah, so I've noticed, I used to think of Abrams as art books, but all of a sudden I noticed you guys I had a student that did a fantastic novel, debut novel, and a memoir, so you guys are really expanding, so tell us about the kind of books you've been.
Yeah, no, we do heavy hitters.
Yeah.
Abrams did start as an art book publisher. Our 75th anniversary was last year, but Abrams Press is the narrative nonfiction and fiction imprint that has existed since 2015. Do not fact check me on that. And when I started 6 years ago, I feel like it was a lot of kind of very, no offense, bro-y books, a lot of sports and a lot of money. And now we do a lot of really important, really beautiful literary memoir. Our book, The Wards of the State, which is about the foster care to prison pipeline, just got longlisted for National Book Award. matters to us is that it's voicey and full of personality.
And from your perspective, for a memoir, are you buying them from proposals? Do you ever need to see if it's a debut book? Do you ever need to see the whole book?
I actually have only bought memoir from proposal, but it is worth stating that all those people either had a meaningful internet following, Dylan Mulvaney, Jesse James Rose, people that I knew could sell, or they had a meaningful journalistic background and connections that I knew they would be a powerhouse of selling their own book. It sucks, but the reality is the author needs to work as hard as the publisher at selling the book. And so often we're really looking at platform.
And if you don't mind, could we talk a little bit about platform? Because some people think it means you need 100,000 Instagram followers, but interestingly, like several of my students here, like Emilio's working on a memoir, and he has most recently published pieces in New York Magazine, the New York Times, Huffington Post. So he's actually building a very big platform just from 5 or 6 small pieces, and I think that could work just as well as a lot of internet followers, right?
No, absolutely. Platform sounds like I just need internet followers, but it means a lot of things. And honestly, in many ways, knowing people, being published places, knowing journalists, knowing podcasters move books in a way we did not anticipate. Publishing is always 5 years late. Like anything like that is just incredibly helpful, especially like your publicist is always fighting to compete with a flooded market all of the time. And it doesn't matter that you maybe have the best book in the whole world if you just like can't get this person at the book desk to open the ARC and read it. But what always matters is the author can get to that person, they will pay attention versus the millionth email from our publicist. So yeah, platform is many things.
It was funny because I used to hate joining things and I wasn't the least bit interested in my alumni association. But then when I did my first book and my publicity team was like, okay, what are your connections? Where do you belong to, whatever? And if I tell you, all my alumni associations, I hadn't been to Temple in 10 years. I joined 3 shuls. I joined like the Writers Guild, the National Book Critics Circle, the Authors Guild, like everything I could think of. And by the way, you need that because if you're going to be giving talks or events or something like that. Yeah, so that's probably good too, connecting with your community.
Yeah, networking is a nightmare, but you have to do it.
Good, okay. Mateo, a lot of people, you were in a different field, you were in tech, and a lot of my students have, they're in a different field and they always wanted to write the great American novel. And you actually just did it. So how does one start? You decide, I wanna, you're in another field, I wanna be a novelist, and so did you just start writing your book? Did you take classes? How did you figure out how to write?
Oh, Sue. All you need to do is go to Goodreads to understand that neither of these are the great American novel. We're still working on it. I'm happy to be here. Thank you. It looks like the Last Supper up here almost, right? Very long. How many people are writing a book? Yeah. How many people are writing a book and don't have their MFA? My people. So I was working tech, and without making the long story extra long, I realized that it was not my purpose in life to sell training platforms to, Wells Fargo and Walmart. And I started to write. For me, writing and then writing fiction was something that I could lose myself in, and I realized that this was something that I wanted to make a go at, but I did not know what I was doing. So I started to play writer. I think some of you might know what that means, right? You've seen what it means to be a writer on TV and movies and books, and you say, they woke up before work and they wrote. Let me wake up at 5 a.m. That didn't work for me. They wrote in the library. Let me go write in the library. I went to the New York Public Library, saw the Gutenberg Bible in there. I didn't write the word. And then for me, I realized that I just need to sit down and write when it makes sense for me. So I started to write on the weekends instead of going out and partying with all these tech people on Fridays. And in a few months, I had finished a book, but again, I did not know what I was doing. So I went to Google, and I Googled how to publish a novel. And they said, okay, you need a literary agent, like some of these beautiful people up here. So I Googled how to get a literary agent, and all of these agencies came up, and I found the emails of the presidents, and I emailed them my novel, which was unedited. Again, I did not know what I was doing. I don't have my MFA. I didn't have any writer friends, and I got a bunch of rejection. But I'll tell you, the rejection felt good because I said that this is what writers get. They get rejection, and now I'm a real writer. And also coming from the world of tech, a no is better than no response. So I realized that okay, like I'm going somewhere, even if I didn't really go anywhere, but I'm feeling the validation from being rejected. I think you know what I mean, right? So from there, I essentially like tweaked that novel. I sent it out to a few more agents when I learned a little bit more about what I was doing, and I got again a bunch of rejection. But this agent said, Mateo, you have a voice, but you need to work on plot and structure. So I did this super sophisticated and complex way of learning plot and structure, and I Googled plot and structure. And then a book came up called Plot and Structure by a man named James Scott Bell, and I bought that book. And we're in a bookstore, but I bought it off Amazon. I'm sorry, I didn't know back then. And I read that book from front to back. I did all the exercises, and I had a book that was plotted and structured. And I learned more about the industry, and I went back out with it. And no, it didn't work. All that voice was gone. It was coherent. It was sterile. In more seedier type of environments, I'll use different words for what happens. I castrated it basically, like it lost its vitality. And at that point, I said, you know what? What am I doing? I'm looking to placate these editors. I'm looking to placate these agents, almost none of which look like me, or look like people I know, or sound like people I know. Obviously, no disrespect to people on here. So I said, I'm just going to write the book that I want in the way that I want for the people that I want to resonate with. And it was then that I came up with the idea that became Black Buck, and got my agents through the slush pile, through manuscript wish list, through publishers marketplace, and it changed my life. Yeah.
New York Times bestseller. Amazing. Okay, so let's go back to Jesse. I want to hear advice. So either what's the best advice that you got when you were working on your career, or what's the best advice that you could share with other people? And by the way, you have a really cool full-time gig, and I love the fact that you started writing small pieces. You said you started writing for free, and then Vulture came to you. But so any other advice that people that want to start writing for New York Magazine, or have a book idea like you did?
Yeah, I mean, the book situation is a little bit different because it was very much a extension of already being fairly established as a journalist writing about a specific topic, and it was honestly my agent's idea broadly. I came to it's an agent I met very, 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 very earlier than I would recommend agents. I don't think I was ready to even be having a conversation about a book, but he was nice. And then over the years, as I got more established, more agents reached out. But then when it came time where I felt like I could write a book, I went back to this person who believed in me before other people did, and I'm very fortunate, quite a bit, at Eaglin. And I pitched an idea for a book about Adam Sandler, because I did a very long list about Adam Sandler. It was a 25,000 word list of Adam Sandler movies. I ranked every movie, but very thorough. I go, I can turn this into a book. And then he's basically the people that want a book about Adam Sandler don't want a book written like this. What is a book? What is your book that you can write that is going to be the book that people want? And he felt like I could just write a book generally about comedy, which is not, sounds like a very broad thing to tell a person, but I just didn't know what counts as a book. I still don't know. We go back and forth with my book counts. But, the thing is I don't think I ever got much advice really for all of it. It's just you listen to people that know more about the thing that you do and try to become the person that knows the most about the thing that you know the most about. My career, I write about comedy. There's three or four full-time journalists who cover comedy. Compare that to every other one that's But I remember there was a documentary about the ABA, and Bob Costas was in it, because Bob Costas' first job was reporting on the ABA, because he couldn't get a job writing about or talking about any other sport. And his entire career became because he was the face of ABA broadcasting. And I remember from then is like, don't go where there are not people doing the thing that you can maybe do. And see how much space you can take up. And then really it's a matter of like, the people decide if they want you to write about that. I mean, like, I didn't set out to be a comedy journalist, considering that when I started, there were none. Jason Zinnemann started maybe a month or so after this website Splitsletter started, so it just was a very new thing. But I was writing about different things, and then when I wrote about comedy, people liked it a little bit more. So you are writing for readers, and if the readers are responding, then your job is to service them. Oh, now I remember the advice, which was, this was not directly told me. The drag queen Trixie Mattel was on a podcast, and she said, you owe it to the people that like what you do not to listen to the people who don't like what you do. And that is a thing I wrote down and I put on the various desks that I wrote the book on, because it is very easy in the type of nonfiction, the criticism type thing I was doing, to try to think about other people's opinions. And be like, oh, what would a person say about this? Maybe I should you find yourself hedging throughout an entire book. When I submitted the first 3 chapters, once I already agreed with the book, and I just to see, like, does this count as a book? And my editor at FSG said, yes, it does, but you do not have to apologize for having written a book. By the time they're reading your book, they believe you know how to write a book. They believe you deserve to write a book. So just write that book. And I do think it is generally what it is. There's the part of you that is the creator, there's the part of you that is the editor of that. And when you are writing, you need to be creating. You should not listen to the part of you that's saying, don't write this. That part should come in when you're rereading it. But, you know, if anyone's buying the book, their hope is to buy what you actually want to put out, not what you think they do, because that's really the only thing you can offer. And it's not easy to achieve, but like that is, I think, the thing worth aspiring to.
Cool, and Kate, if you don't mind, I'll bug you again about kids' books. So when I was working on a middle grade co-authored book, the advice that helped me the most was somebody who just said, go out and read 20 similar books. And so it was a co-authored book about war and trauma by a boy. And so I read so many books, and I had everything wrong. Like, I'm so glad I did that, because, for example, I was writing sort of from more of an adult point of view, and there were more adults in the book, and after I kept reading, I started really getting the voice. So if somebody either has an idea for a picture book, MG, or YA, would you say a good place to start would be go read the books that are out there now? Not what was out there when you were a kid, but what's doing well now?
Absolutely. And if you were going to try to write a picture book, you need to go read 100 picture books. Go to the library, sit on the floor, read what's ever in front of you, and hopefully things that were published in the last 5 to 7 years. Because I have this theory that if a child comes into your life at any time who is a picture book age, you will think you can write a picture book within 6 months. And when my clients have a child come into their life, I start a clock, and then more or less it happens, and that's exactly what happened to me. I wrote my picture book that's coming out next year 8 years ago. My kid is 9. And so I did not know how much I didn't know about picture books until I was reading them out loud to a kid over and over and over again. And the ones that were hard to read, we didn't pick up again. And the ones that were overly moralizing or condescending or like, be sure to share, and like all these things and things that you should say to kids, and this goes for middle grade YA too. Like, you're not teaching anybody by saying you should do this. Actually, it goes for all books of all time. Nobody buys a book because they should, unless they're assigned in a class. So you can't should into being an author. But especially for kids, you're there to entertain them. You're there to empathize with them. You're there to connect with them. You're not there to teach them, even if it is a nonfiction book. But yeah, you got to read 100 million things, and they need to be published in the last 3 to 5 years for middle grade and YA, and you can go a little bit deeper in the backlist for fictional side.
And if you're gonna write, even if you write a whole picture book or a whole MG or a whole YA, do you also still need to get comp titles, even though it's not a real proposal? So if you're writing a letter to an agent, you wanna send the manuscript to an agent and you wanna say it's in the vein of these books, right?
Yes, definitely. I think there's kind of two kinds of comp titles. There's comp titles for vibes and comp titles for sales. And at the query letter stage, you don't really know anything about sales. And I think it's okay to go with vibes. You can be like, oh, my book is The Summer I Turned Pretty meets Frankenstein. Sorry, those are two books right in front of me. And that's fine, even if it's something out, like a movie or a TV show. But if you're saying this is the Phantom Tollbooth meets Anne of Green Gables, that's not a thing that's gonna resonate, even if kids are still reading those books.
Cool. And Pranoy, I know that you were a book editor and now you've switched to an agent, and I would guess as an agent that you're gonna be working with some debut authors that probably don't have as big of platforms as the book authors that you have, and it's Little Brown and St. Martin's. So what kind of advice do you give to the, I know a lot of my students have approached you with projects. And do you wanna see full-fledged nonfiction proposals before somebody even contacts you?
Yeah, I mean, I have, well, that's a very broad question. But, I would say that the thing that I have been struck by, published debut authors, whether they were journalists, whether they were memoirists, some recognized as places now, I hope people some, it's better to hear, I'd say better to hear no than to not hear at all. Great advice. I think the thing that sort of consistent, I've got experts, people who are MacArthur's, people with platforms, people without platforms. I think the thing that constantly comes up that I find to be very, very valuable is the authors who not just read but understand within their space why the books that they're reading and why they're working at craft level, what engages them. And this is not a category thing. This is like, is it the voice? Is it the research? Is it the, what is it about what they're trying to do that excites me as a reader? And am I able to map that? And I think the authors who come with that knowledge baked in, so that they can say, you know what, I'm not interested, my novel is plotless because, not because I never thought about it, but in fact because I have thought about it, the vitality is lost, and in fact this is, and I find that the people who have really processed, I'll give you a good example. I was talking to an editor the other day, I've had this problem myself where
Just
someone
speak a
will
little
say,
louder,
I don't know if this is
The mic is not there.
Yeah,
That one is better.
So, oh wow. It's a big difference. Okay, so I remember someone was out with a proposal. This has happened to me. I was talking to an editor, and they were comparing it to, I'm gonna just use your example, Malcolm Gladwell. Okay, and there's it's like Malcolm Gladwell. Okay, so we're talking about comps. The problem with Malcolm Gladwell, I work with Malcolm Gladwell, is that Malcolm Gladwell has a formula, he knows what he's doing. Like him or hate him, he invented a style of, expert journalism. All the experts hate him because he, mischaracterizes it, but nonetheless, it's popular. And then there are a lot of people who want to write like that. But the problem is, if you're going to write like that, you have to understand that Malcolm Gladwell is not asking people, how do I come up with a tipping point? He came up with a tipping point, found the stories, and delivered it. So you can't say you want to be, so what the editor was saying is that this person was basically saying they want to be like Malcolm Gladwell. The entire proposal was asking, I would like help to figure out this, and this, and this. So you're not Malcolm Gladwell. Because Malcolm Gladwell doesn't ask those questions. He's off asking questions to other people to help figure out. So to me, when you process, when you're reading productively, not just to understand the space, because obviously that's the first step, but also is this is like, what are they doing? You know, like they capture emotions very well. They are very good researchers. They are reporters. You know, like there are aspects of the craft to the structure, all these things that I think when you understand, okay, this is why in this space it's working, I can see why it's working, and I emulate it, and you bring that awareness to your own project, I think it makes the conversation and your approach that much more useful. And then the second, I'll just end with, and I say this all the time, so some many panels, I always say, especially for debut writers, the book idea should be the last approach that you take to any idea. Like if your first idea is not a book, your second idea might not be a book. It could be an article, it could be a tweet, it could be a Substack article. Like if you've exhausted all forms and you figure out that the only way to accomplish this is in 60,000 words, you're gonna put in that sweat equity and that much time into it. It needs to really be that, and it's not a gimmick, it's not an article, it can't be any of those things, it has to be this. Then, and only then, should you say, okay, I've got a book. And so I always say the book is the last act. If the only way to pull it off is in a book, then you're getting close, you're getting more.
Cool, and Matthew, what kind of advice do you give to aspiring authors here?
No, this is a really good conversation, and I think that we're all kind of talking about very similar things. I think we're talking about authenticity and tentativeness. I think Matteo, you were so right. You were like feeling you were being forced to change your voice. So you only succeeded when you went back and went to your true voice. You see that with fiction writing. You certainly see it in the nonfiction space. Because I will often work with, maybe medical doctors or historians or business leaders, and they are trying to make something that isn't them. They're trying to emulate other successful books when their own books. They have to be the authority. People are spending $30, $35 for a book. So they don't want you to hold back. They want you to tell the truth. You are the expert in your field. So I think that's kind of what I've been seeing over the years, and I think a lot of us are saying that.
Great, and also when it comes to comp titles, I've got a lot of editors and agents say, don't use Malcolm Gladwell, don't say Great Gatsby, don't say Eat, Pray, Love. Like find debut authors who aren't like mega huge bestsellers.
Oh,
because
totally.
that's-
I mean, how many times
Right.
do I get things? Oh, just like Malcolm Gladwell, or who's the author of Educated? Tara. Yeah. Oh my God, I got so many of those.
Great. Lee, could you give us some advice? And also, you're so good with memoirs, and I have so many students that are struggling with memoirs right now. So, and I know you're doing ghost editing, so if someone were to come to you, for example, and they had a memoir that was really just their own first-person story, would you be able to help them figure out how to maybe make it, more attractive to the big publisher?
Yeah, I think my advice is about the importance of distance, either emotional distance or time distance. When I'm evaluating a new project or when I was evaluating a proposal, one thing that I could see really clearly was when an author is really still in the story, and it felt very raw. I'm like, oh, this is they're not ready to write this book yet. Maybe in a few years when they have more space to be able to tell the full story, but they might still be in the story. So the importance of distance, I think, is really, really valuable as a writer to be able to approach your work and treat it as something separate from yourself. So I find it, we're more able to go through a book and look at particular stories and say, okay, I can see that you were really, really angry in this moment, and this is like a big cathartic moment, but also the same thing happened 30 pages earlier, and if a reader is reading this, they're going to feel like this is repetitive. If you are still in the story yourself, that would feel really painful, and you might not be able to make that change that would make the book better. it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be emotionally cold to be able to write beautifully and write well. I think there's incredible power in anger. I think we should all be angry more often. So I don't think that books need to be completely devoid of emotion, but I do think that there needs to be space so that you're able to take it, approach the writing and revising process from a place of seeing it as a separate entity from your own life, if you're writing a memoir. That also makes it a lot easier in like the parts when you get to publishing and promoting the book, to be able to maintain boundaries about what you do and don't include in the book. If you're really in the story and you want to say everything, you want to be cathartic and you want to get everything out on the page, it's possible that 5 years from now you will look back and say, ooh, I wish my second cousin didn't know this about me, or like, this was maybe a little too much. Like having the space to be able to create the boundaries that you want to be able to keep and maintain as you're talking about your book out in public with people who don't know you is only really possible, I think, if you have a little more space.
But in Sarah, from the standpoint of a book editor, what kind of advice can you give?
For getting published.
Or, and especially so many of my students are interested in memoir.
Yeah, I think memoir is it is difficult, as we've discussed. I think this goes into what's been said already, but it's being really market savvy. And it's also being flexible, which requires often that you are able to step back and see the version of yourself in your memoir as a character. All authors care very deeply about their books, but no one cares more than someone who writes a memoir. And there's always funny moments where I'm like, this story beat is not working. And they're like, but it happened like that literally. And I'm like, but I don't care. And if there's one thing I know from doing many legal reads with our lawyer, memoirs are full of lies. And it's okay. Because it's not actually the reportage of your life. It's the story of a moment. Having real awareness of what's already out there and what actually and sincerely makes you different and stands out, while also being true to yourself, I think is really, really critical.
Cool. And tell us, in terms of fiction, what advice would you give? I won't just go for it. Hold on to what you love.
2 or 3 things. The first thing is that you need to get rid of the pressure that you put on yourself. Right? Like, when I brought up sweat equity, the time that we're putting into our books, the time that we're spending here, is time that we're never going to get back. We could be doing other things. You're choosing to write a book, you're choosing to write an essay, a blog, whatever. It's important, but we're not getting like bombed. You know what I'm saying? So just sit down and put the words down and finish. Your number one priority, I don't like to use the word should often. For me, the number one priority was finishing. Having something completed, to then having something I could edit, to then having something I could query and send out, or show a friend, or a beta reader, whatever. And I was not going to do that 1 time, 2 times, or 3 times, right? This is the 3rd time. And unfortunately, I write a lot. I'm going like 90,000 words, 100,000 words. This one is like a doorstopper or a weapon, you could hurt someone with it. But the point is that the only way you get these words down is by not being so in your head and putting this immense pressure to write the great American novel. Just try to say something true that reflects your perspective on the world, because if you do that, more than likely someone will read it and say, oh, I'm not alone. I think this way too, and I feel this way. It's number 1. Number 2 is run your own race. There are so many people in this industry that are jaded, or like haters, or this, that, and the other. Some could be your friends, some could be strangers, some could be a random person on Twitter. It doesn't matter. Run your own race. Write the book that you're meant to write. Oftentimes people try to mimic, another writer that they admire, and that's cool. It's sort of like writing with training wheels until you find your own voice. I'm not against that, but just try to run your own race. Stop thinking that you want to be the next whoever, Malcolm Gladwell, Tara Westover, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Philip Roth, someone like that. Just focus on saying what you want to say in the way that you want to say it. And the third thing, and some people would find this, a little incendiary, or not, is get off social media. Use it less. It is not helping you. Unless you're writing about something in the pop culture zeitgeist, or you want to see six-pack abs that were on Love Island the previous night, right? Get off social media. Preferably entirely. If you can't do that because it is intoxicating and it is a narcotic, then limit yourself, because I'm telling you, it's only going to make you compare yourself to all these other people and flood your mind with overstimulation and thoughts that have nothing to do with you, and worse, are not going to help you finish your book, blog, whatever. Be kind to yourselves, run your race, and let's get these words out. Yeah.
Great. Well, actually, some of my students asked me about how I became so prolific, and they said, I'm not afraid to suck.
Yeah.
So the first drafts don't have to be good, they just have to get out there. I would say the other things that have helped me are therapy, classes, writing group, and ghost editors. And I also think that 3 pages really can change your life, so I have found that if I have an idea for a book, if I try a short piece, that really helps me a lot. It just helps me figure out, is this an idea, is an editor gonna be interested, who's my audience? So I would say, if you guys have book ideas, start with a short piece. All right, I'm gonna ask one more question, and then we're gonna open it up. Last question is, what do you have going on now that's exciting? So, Jesse, are you, you're writing for Vulture? Are you doing more book events?
Can I add one thing about memoir?
Please, please.
Because I have one perspective. I have one perspective on the memoir that is unique in so much as my book is not a memoir and it's not a memoir, but other than the place that I went with, every other publisher said, "Can he write a memoir instead?" And I said no, because actually all the memories I have are the stories that were already told in the proposal. But what I learned from that, as a person who never thought they'd write a memoir, was publishers are not buying the facts of your life. You're not selling the facts of your life. You don't go, I have an interesting life, you should pay me. They're paying your ability to make something that people want to be entertained by and be interested by. The reason people wanted a memoir from me is they thought my voice was interesting and there were some personal anecdotes that were well told in it. So they're like, oh, I'm sure there's probably a thing in terms of memoir. But I think probably when people think they have a memoir in them, they think their life is interesting in one way or another. But and it might be, but I don't think mine is, and I didn't particularly feel like sharing whatever it was. But you're a writer; they're paying for your ability to write. You could write bullet points of your life that's interesting and post that somewhere. So that was just the thing. I work at Vulture. I host a podcast called Good One. We switched to video in June. We already added video, as many podcasts did, and I will say I learned a lot about the power of social video, or what you think it's like making TikTok or Instagram, which I'm happy to go. I'm not on social media other than the days the episodes post, and then I post the videos that we're making. But for as bad as social media is, we're in a rare time where you can connect with strangers who are interested in the things that you have. Maybe not, but the algorithms will find people that are interested in the things. I have no idea how one does that when they're not a podcast host. That's on y'all, but I do think it's something to think about, especially if you're working in a nonfiction space. It's like, I displayed expertise by being a professional journalist in it, but there are a lot of people who call themselves journalists on social media who are just people talking about reviewing things online, and young people do not distinguish between me and them, and then if you build a following doing that, publishers will not distinguish, assuming that by the end of the day you're able to actually write the book. or minimum if you have such a platform, they will find someone else who will write the book for you.
Cool, and so Kate, are you doing more events for Right Through It? And I know that you're gonna be doing events probably for, Pay Attention to Me next year.
Yes, tomorrow I'm going to Stamford, Connecticut to do the Book Literary Festival, which I believe is at a country club, so that will be fun. Doing a book event in Philly coming up in November, and I'm going to Boston next spring for a BU day of narrative something. I speak at colleges and universities. I'm going to Wilmington, North Carolina in a couple weeks. So yeah, I've been very happy with all the opportunities I've gotten to talk about Right Through It, and things are still shaping up for Pay Attention to Me. It comes out in May 26th, and I hope to, maybe just go to my kids' school and read it.
And for manuscript wish list, do you say when you're open for which kind of submissions?
I am open for queries right now. You can query me through querytracker.com. That's where I receive queries. Bunch of different stuff: science fiction, fantasy for adults and kids, literary fiction, commercial fiction, all kinds of stuff. I also write a newsletter at agentsandbooks.com. We just moved from Substack to Ghost, and I talk about all this kind of stuff: how to get published, what's the book proposal. I want to start a new series about how to be an author, which I think is different than how to sell a book. How to think about being an author for a career, and how you can set yourself up for that.
Cool. And Pranoy, I think you said that instead of manuscript wish list, that you're on your the website of your agency. What kind of books you're open for?
Yeah, I'm on the website, and people seem friendly from also. I got DMs, and also it's easy to find someone online. So, yes, but I'm on the agency. I want to actually just step back and actually build on a couple things that you said, just to mention, and hopefully this is inspiring as well. When you said something about emotional distance in personal writing, and something you mentioned about the process of just writing the words down, one thing that I have noticed, and it's been happening over the past few years, and this applies to memoirists as well. Am I on the wrong? This is okay. I just need to be closer. Is that regardless of category, but I guess it applies in memoir in particular. The thing that has been really interesting in my experience is that when people are writing about their stories, they talk about emotional distance. And I'm just going to use a book that's not a comp, but I've read it recently. It really moved me, Last Castle. But it's because, in some ways, yes, her life was difficult. She may have been angry. She may have been frustrated with her parents. She was dealt a bad hand. But the book is written in such a way that, like a good novel, she does not give away how she feels now when she wrote the book versus when she started the book. In the book itself, physically, she's 3. And at 3, she's having a good time. She's burning her fingers. She's running around, like a rascal. And they're fleeing from the FBI, according to her father, and looking for gold in the West. And like a good novel, you feel like you're part of this journey to discover if there's a sort of transcendent quality. You learn something about love, you learn something about relationships, you learn something about a part of society that you never thought about. And that kind of transportation, I feel like across categories, you feel that. So whether you like horror movies or action movies, there's that sort of genre convention, but then there's sort of deeper works. It's like, yes, there's the particulars, but they reveal something in a way that you never really considered. And I find that a lot of publishers are sort of, because things are so tough, because the world is getting so complex, because things are moving, or in some ways are even moving beyond kind of categorical thinking, and are just looking for like where, in whatever avenue you're approaching this, whether you're a memoirist, or a reporter, or an expert, whatever, that like, are you bringing a kind of new way into thinking about something transcendent, something that matters, something that resonates with people and can resonate with people in an impactful way. And I think that bringing that out your way, but also speaking to not just in the naval days, but also speaking to infinite varieties of ways in which we can think about these things, and then plotting it out in a way that brings people to that. I mean, I remember talking to a scientist years ago, and he said, and we were trying to go back and forth and figuring out how to get. And I was like, what did you know about this topic when you were 16? Turns out you knew a lot. So I was like, okay, what did you know about this topic when you were 8? And he's like, oh, I guess I didn't know much. And I said, okay, you're gonna write for your 8-year-old self, and then by the time you finish the book, it's for your 16-year-old self. And over the course of the book, your 8-year-old self is gonna learn what your 16-year-old self found out. You're gonna take us on this journey. And it just unlocked for him how to slow down and bring people along and bring them forward like you do when you watch a good movie or you read a good novel.
Well, okay, thank you. Matthew, are you open for queries now, and can we find you on your website or manuscript
Yes,
list?
yes, I'm on a manuscript wish list, although I should probably update it. I have a website. Take a look at that. You'll see the types of books that I do. Just a few practical things. Talking about writing nonfiction, serious nonfiction book proposals. There's another really, really good book that I always refer clients to. It's called Thinking Like an Editor by Susan Brather. She's an excellent. It's a great book. There's a great chapter. It's a general book on writing serious nonfiction generally, but it also has a chapter on writing book proposals. It's just excellent. And then a few thoughts about memoir. And I guess this might be part of the discussion about distance. I'm very surprised there's been so little out there about COVID. People experiences of COVID. You know, I mean, a lot
There's a
of
couple
people
good
die.
novels. There's a couple good novels.
Novels, but what about memoirs?
I mean, my impression with newspaper and magazine editors is they were basically said, we don't wanna hear about it,
Okay.
we're not ready to deal with it yet.
And then the other thing too is we are in such a tremendously horrible political time. I used to do a lot of political books, but I kind of gave up hope. But where are the new voices in resistance and just this dreadful stuff that's going on in this country? You know, race issues, bigotry, homophobia. I don't know, I'm an old white guy. I don't see enough stuff coming across my desk for those types of memoirs, those types of voices. And I can't say I'm seeing a lot being published in that space, so I'm surprised by that.
Now, Lee, you left a full-time job recently to go freelance. If somebody wants to work with you, do you have a website, do you have cards you can give out?
I don't have business cards, but you can find me just by Googling my name, Lee Oglesby. My website is leeoglesby.com. And I'm also on the independent book editors list, so you can find me and a bunch of other incredible freelance editors there.
And aside from Marion's book, which is a little less broken, were there any other books that you were very proud of that were coming out from Flatiron before you left?
Yes, so one that I'm very excited to publish, which is coming out next week, it's called Authentic, The Myth of Bringing Your Full Authentic Self to Work by Jodi Anbury. It is all about the call that employers make to bring our full authentic selves and how they are kind of lying, and this doesn't actually work for most of us and is actually pretty harmful. But Jodi Anbury is one of the smartest writers I've ever had the pleasure of editing, and the book is really, really beautiful. So that's coming out next week, next Tuesday. It'll be available everywhere, and she's touring around, so look out for that.
Fantastic. And Sarah, anything from Abrams coming out that you worked on that we should go by?
Yeah, in 2 weeks, a memoir I worked on that I'm very, very proud and excited about. It's called Sorry I Keep Crying During Sex by Jesse James Rose. It is the funniest trauma memoir you will ever read. Every review has a little line right now that says, it's not for everyone. I'm like, in the spring, I also have a book coming out called Nonstop Bodies, which is a whole history of 20th century New York City children's history of dance and all the dance styles and different kinds of people who have invented and connected with dance in this city and how it really tells the story of America. And then hold on for spring 2027. I acquired a book about the history of the Girl Scout cookie, and I'm so excited. So just wait. Maybe it's a while, but hold on.
Cool, and Nettie, are you doing a lot of book events? Can you contact any of them?
Yeah. You can email me, Mateo@MateoWrites.com if you want to talk more. Working on other books. That Girl Scout one sounds amazing. Trefoil, my favorite. Yes, that's it.
What's the most exciting thing so far about your book? Is it seeing it? Is it reviews? Getting a great review? The NPR rave?
Yeah, to be completely honest, I'm the type of person where it's like I write the book, it's out, I do the thing, and then I'm working on another one. So yeah, I'm grateful that I've been able to publish 2 books thus far that are very different in genre and feeling, but still have some connective tissue. Grateful to be invited to do things and to look into the eyes of all of these people whose books will be on shelves in the future, hopefully. Thanks for your time.
And I'm doing a bunch of online stuff this term. You can take my card, and I'm going to go back and teach a writing class in person at NYU next term. But right now it's still online, and now we have time for questions. So raise your hand. Chloe.
I had a question about memoirs and essay collections. At which point do you know whether it should be an essay collection or a memoir?
Great question. So essay collection or memoir. So does anybody have any, Lee, do you have any opinion about which would be, does it just depend on the,
I think there is less of a distinction between the two than it seems. I think you probably know that pretty late in the stage. Look, as you're writing, just write whatever feels correct, and then you'll see whether there are cohesions around particular themes that suggest that it is more like an essay. But honestly, there's not much of a difference between an essay collection and a memoir, and there doesn't have to be, for my.
Sarah, have you published essay collections?
I was gonna say to you, I would be really flexible about that because every different publisher and every different editor feels differently about those things. Abrams is really allergic to essay collections. It can be really hard to make them work. But there have been many times where I've gotten an essay collection and I've gone to them and said, I would publish this if it wasn't that. And sometimes, this is your right. They say, no, this is what I'm gonna do, and that's okay. But I think it's really important to have an open mind and be able to collaborate with an editor in that way.
Good, other questions? Amelia, I'm sorry, Matthew,
Hang
go
on,
ahead.
just a quick comment.
Yes.
I'm wondering if there's a little difference between essays and straight memoir in terms of the distance factor. If with essays you're writing about other topics, of course they're your interpretation, but with memoir it's kind of full immersion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and also Chloe has a fantastic platform because she's been in the Atlantic and Washington Post and a bunch of really,
Yeah.
she sold short essays, so that might make it a little bit easier to sell an essay collection.
Yeah.
With that great platform, and she also did social media, right?
Decent.
How many followers?
33K?
33,000, pretty good, pretty good.
That, I will say, I was told pretty early on, do as much as possible to make your thing not seem like an essay collection. You will be paid much less for it.
Okay.
That's the cinnamon plan. So you have maybe enough followers that you can maybe make a case for an essay collection, but really essay collections are going for people that are like, they're hoping the review is like the new Joan Didion's whatever, which already happened for Gina's book. So as much as possible, try to make it memoirs that they will pay more money for.
Or nonfiction, like another
Sorry.
topic, like research, nonfiction. Amelia.
Yes, thank you all for coming and for the amazing information. So as far as the query letter, if you were to get one and you like
Query
it,
letter to a literary agent?
yes, to an agent, let's say you get one and you really like it, what's the one thing in that letter that would turn you off from the offer, even though you like the idea?
Oh, great question.
There-
So Kate, what would
There
make you?
isn't one thing.
Well, by the way, if it's like, I bet if it's like 2,000 words,
No,
it's
I mean-
too long.
I think the one thing is, like, you're a jerk, but please be my agent. Like, that would be the one thing. There isn't this one little thing that's gonna do your your chances, because we can see beyond that. We know that query letters are fallible and silly and inadequate for telling you about a whole book. So we can see beyond the, oh no, you spelled my name wrong, or oh no, you said your book is gonna be like the next Harry Potter, blah, blah, blah. But we can see the book in there, we'll forgive what you might not even know is a misstep, as long as you're not a jerk, you know, or trying to kind of shuck and jive and be like, well, I'll give you more commission if you be my agent. I'm like, I can't actually change that. Like, I'm not allowed to take more of your money, you know, and people think they can kind of, you know, maneuver their way in this. Just tell me about the book in the best way they can.
Bernard, what would turn you off and make you think I'm not gonna, well, probably, for example, if someone sent you science fiction or poetry, you would think this person didn't check to see what kind of category it's agent, right?
But no, I do have one, because I get it all the time, and I find it hilarious, I read it out loud, I've said it on panels before. I think humility is a superpower. If you tell me that this happened this morning, that your book is gonna win the Pulitzer, if you're interested in representing the Pulitzer, you have to read this book. I just find it, I just said, what's hilarious? One person once said, you know, it's like Orwell, it's like Animal Farm, it's like this, it's like, it's not, it's gonna sell as many copies as this. They just like listed off, like, you know, everyone's like ninth grade English students. I just think that, you know, when you're writing a query letter, be concise, tell us, what is the book, what are you doing, who are you, and, you know, you can bring in, again, you can mention, you know, compared to films, TVs, live, whatever you want, but just let the material speak. You know, don't present it like you are Toni Morrison meets, you know, Johnny Cash meets Roseanne. Like, I mean, just let other people like say that for you. You know, like, you know, I mean, present and introduce someone as a great American novel, and then, you know, like, just let other people be. You know, if you think that the book is, nobody knows what's going to win the Pulitzer, including the people who win the Pulitzers, including people who send the books to the Pulitzer Prize Committee. So just don't say any of that. Just lead with humility, and this is what I'm trying to do. And so, are you interested? And I think, I know a lot, you'd be surprised, a lot of people say that they think that if you just tell them, this is going to win a Nobel Prize, it's not how it works. And you know, that's the number one.
Matthew, what would turn you off in a letter, in a pitch?
Oh, God.
Well, keep it short, right, because a lot of agents I hear say if they get a 2 or 3
Oh, no,
page
yeah,
letter,
of
that
course.
that's a real turn on.
Well, I'll say something instead. I'll say something that might perk me up is when you mention a book that I actually represented. You know, I see that you and especially in the fiction space, I think this applies. I see that you represented XYZ. I'm very much trying to do something similar, or my book has shades of this. I think that would help a lot. But comps are important, very important, clearly, and then straightaway credentials, especially nonfiction.
And I think we have time for one more question. Paloma?
Yeah, so this question is, I guess, and Matthew kind of touched on it, but I just want to get a better one. So, if you're writing a novel and you have a couple of prompt titles in mind, do you query the agent who has represented that book, and are they more or less likely to take a similar book?
Interesting question. So if she came to the agent of a book that she admires and said, you know, my book is maybe in the same vein, would you consider mine? Is that positive or negative?
I think it's probably a negative because they probably have that agent. She's probably received 100 similar letters.
I'll weigh in on that too. I think that it can't hurt because there are like 1,000 agents and you can query 1 billion of them. You know, like you won't query all of them, but you can look and see specifically just how close. You know, I worked with Alice Harrow, new book coming out next month. She wrote a book called Once and Future Witches, and I get every query that has a witch in the title. And that is kind of fine, but that's like a keyword search instead of a context search. And so you can send me a book if it's got a witch in it, and I'm not gonna reject it just because I have another book with a witch in it, but you really do your homework about that specific bit to be like, well, I can't represent another nonfiction book about the economics of cell phones, I don't know, and because that's too niche. But also you'll query a lot of agents and it'll be okay that someone said no.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story about the importance of comp titles, which might answer your question, which is, there was a book I did that was a co-authored memoir, and we were trying to turn it into a kid's book. So I Googled and did a lot of work, and I wrote, I Googled, memoir, immigration memoir turned kid book. And I looked at Goodreads and I looked at Amazon, whatever, and there was actually one that came up. And so I went out and bought the book, the memoir, and the recent middle grade. And I thought, wow, this is exactly what I want to do. So I wrote a really good comp title about, how I love she had turned the memoir into a middle grade book, and this was by a woman, and it was funny, and the story that we were writing was by a male, and it was more serious, and it turned out the agent who did that kid's book bought the book. And apparently what happened was somebody else was reading the proposal at her publisher and say, hey, this was your book, and gave it to the editor next door, sitting next door to her, and she thought, oh yeah, I know how to market that. So I will say that's a really good argument for picking really good comp titles, because publishing is sort of small and insular, and so that could work.
So can I just say,
Sure, answer.
I mean, I know that it's hard when you think of really big authors, but I've always said the acknowledgements are your best friend. I mean, they really provide a really good projection of all the people behind the scenes, and really look at them. Most books have them, and they really will refer to agents. And the reason I bring this up is yes, okay, fine, you can name the top 5 most famous authors. It's a little harder, but there are so many books, And when you're pitching a memoir and you're going through the shelf and you're looking at this, and this, and you start picking up names, what you're really finding with those agents and why you want to write those agents down is because they have a sensibility. They're interested in this. They're representing it. They're selling it. They're working in these spaces, and I think that really matters. And it's the acknowledgements kind of give you a sense of who are the agents who care about this stuff, this topic, this work. And so I do think it's very valuable to find agents. Yeah, right. I mean, going to the most famous novelist in the space is agent. Also they might not have time because they're representing people like that. But there are other there's a sensibility question here where I think that the acknowledgement page really establishes, and people don't look at it enough.
Any final questions? Darren?
Yes, so I know a lot of writers and authors can tend to be really introverted. Their strong suit is the written word. How important is it in today's day and age for a writer and author to embrace social media? Is that attractive that maybe a writer and author will push their work there on their own? Do you want to see that work from them? I know that it's the onus falls on them. So how important is that?
Yes, Sarah, what do you think?
I don't think you have to have a social media following, but I think you need to be a competent speaker, able to do interviews, to talk to people, to go to events, to be able to speak up for yourself and make your own connections, either with journalists or booksellers or all these things. You have to be a proactive go-getter. It is tough in this industry, definitely. Both authors and editors attract people who just want to read in the corner, but also being an editor was a scam. This is a public speaking job where I public speak constantly. I don't get to read in the corner, and neither do the authors. So no social media is fine, but being a confident, loud person is very important.
Well, Marilyn, last question?
Can I just add to that as a person who had to speak a lot? In many ways, it's what separates an author from a person who writes for a hobby. I did a lot of interviews for one book. It's part of the reason I was able to sell a book. I know a lot of famous comedians that gave a podcast. I appeared on a lot of them. I appeared on 6 in 4 days. It was not a nice week of my life. It was actually very unpleasant, and I was exhausted and was a bad father and partner during that time period. But that was the job. That's why I was selling the book. That is the job part of it. You hope to get to a point where you're so successful successful that you actually don't have to do any of that, but that is a select group from any art form. And you don't have to do this as a job. There's no rule that says you have to write as a job to be a writer. But if you want to write for a job, marketing is part of it, and it is going to be maybe the hardest part of it. Even if it seems, especially because you have to make it seem to people watching you that it's the most fun part. Otherwise, you're not going to sell books. If you're like, well, that person's a bummer, I don't want to buy their book. And it's hard. And there's a podcast appearance that I have on that I'm very thankful is behind the paywall, because I truly like. It is terrifying to be talking about a movie, like a comedy movie in my case, and you're like, I have no opinions to voice. It is my turn to speak. It is, it's part of it. Social media is, you can take a lead, but like at some point you probably have to talk about your book.
Marilyn, next question.
Yes, I know you mentioned for nonfiction that you should develop a platform, have various articles published. But what about trying to get excerpts from a novel published? Is that a no-no, or is that a good idea?
Yeah, excerpts from a novel, is that good to publish?
If you can find a place that will publish it, go, you can do that. It is not a no-no, it is fine to do it.
And I could still include that
By the way,
in the
you
novel?
wouldn't want to sell 10 different sections of a novel, because then you're not giving original
Right.
material. But I'll tell you a trick. I have several students who have sold big novels after they published short nonfiction pieces on the same topic in Modern Love or in Washington Post, and all they say on the bottom is working on a novel, and it's a billion times easier to sell a short nonfiction piece than it is to sell fiction, in my experience. Have you seen that, Kate?
Definitely, but it's a thing, it's like if you can do it, then it is a reputable place and it can only help. I don't think it would hurt, but it also is not gonna be something that tips the scales. And I don't look at something I love and be like, well, it wasn't published as an excerpt somewhere, and not offer representation, especially for fiction. For nonfiction, completely different. For fiction, I don't care if it's been published before, I don't care if you've been in a literary journal before, I need the book to be sellable and great, and everything else is gravy. For nonfiction, it's absolutely have to be out in the world somewhere.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much for coming, and especially thanks to Francisco Serrano for letting us do this. And thanks to our panelists, so Mateo, his books are for sale here. And next to me is Sarah Robbins, Lee Oglesby, and if anybody wants to get her information for ghost editing, and I heard a rumor that Prinoy Sakar also does ghost editing, so I can give you their information if you want. Matthew Carnicelli, literary agent, Kate's new book, Right Through It, and Jesse David Fox by Comedy Book, by Books Up Here. Thank you guys so much for coming.